He was sprinting. He was running, Jack. He was running around. Felt like he did that on purpose, didn't he? I mean, he was making it known to everyone that he was committed, that he was running and that he was putting a shift in. His first act was actually making a foul, so I think that said it all. He was there to actually put himself about, and he's probably aware of the conversation around him. Wanted to sign a third midfielder. The problem is now that the targets have become, they've fallen like dominoes, really. They've gone to other clubs, and we're in the back end of the transfer window now, and we're looking at potentially who those betters are. You're scratching your head a little bit. Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. I'm Jack Flintham and I'm joined today by Steven Railston. Steve, how are we doing?
I'm well, thank you, Jack. Although I'm 12 pounds lighter this morning, I do feel like less of a man. Went on a walk to Heaton Park yesterday evening with my girlfriend, and we're walking around and we got dragged into a fair. When I say dragged, that's that she spotted it and said we'll have to go in. Now obviously there's little games, isn't it? And I promised I'd win a prize. So I had 2 attempts, and on the third attempt there was a dart game, and I fancy myself a dart. I'm all right. And it was basically get under 40, I think. No, so it was under 30 in 4 darts. Got the first 3, I think it was 2, 3, 6. So, only had to hit whatever, a very low score to win the prize, a big fluffy animal, and I bottled it. Hit treble 15. In my defence, it was magnetic darts that were terrible to throw. But yeah, I felt like less of a man, and I simmered on it as I walked around the lake. I was very disappointed in myself. How's yourself?
I'm much better than that. I'm just wondering if that's why the dartboard's in the background there. Is it trying to get some redemption?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of went from a darts era. I was playing a lot in the last 18 months, 2 years. I don't play as much anymore. Had a setup for in the living room, but that's a spare dartboard that's currently on show. I'll get used at some point.
Yeah, but no, I wouldn't beat yourselves up too much about it, Steve, because obviously those games are often rigged, and we've all fell foul of missing out on the lovely prizes that they. For legal
reasons, Jack will say that they're not rigged, but they appear to be rigged. That's what we'll say for legal reasons.
I was trying to make sure you say face, Steve, but okay, yeah. We'll go with that legal approach. But I suppose we should also talk about some football that's gone on this weekend, and Manchester United have wrapped up their pre-season tour with a defeat to Ruben Amorim's AC Milan in Wrocław, Poland. What was your sort of overall reaction to that one then? A 4-2 defeat, but obviously it's one of those things where results are sort of secondary to what else it can bring for a team, isn't it?
Yeah, it was disappointing, obviously. I mean, you don't want to end pre-season, which is the final match of pre-season. You don't want to end it in that manner, especially against Ruben Amorim. And no doubt the players would have wanted to win. The staff would have wanted to win, considering it was Amorim's reunion, but it was a quite disappointing performance. Started off quite well. Maguire's goal was pretty good, but the defending was very sloppy. I actually thought it was sloppy from both sides, to be fair. Obviously, that throw-in, pardon me, with Mazraoui, that was very uncharacteristic, and you wouldn't see that during the season, that kind of mistake. And Milan made one of them themselves, actually, for Patrick Dorgu's goal as well. You never see 2 goals from throw-ins, you never see 1. So it just showed that perhaps these teams aren't as long as they would like to be with their fitness. And that probably played a role. Players came on in the second half who were just coming back. Marcus Rashford, Kobbie Mainoo, Lisandro Martinez. For Lisandro Martinez, looked rusty, understandably so. He's probably been on the beach enjoying himself since Argentina made the World Cup final, living a little. And when he pushed up for that Loftus-Cheek goal, he just got caught for toe. He was caught out for position, and he didn't have the pace to catch up with him. So yeah, it was disappointing, but I wouldn't throw my toys out the pram. I wouldn't get too carried away in terms of losing my mind about the defeat. I think someone pointed out on Twitter yesterday afternoon that United lost 3-0 against Arsenal in the 1998 Community Shield, and we all know what happened that season. So, look, pre-season matches, essentially, they are an exercise for fitness. Having said that, the final game, you would have liked to see a little bit more. There was a few concerning signs. I think playing against 5 at the back, I think, is Carrick's system going to work? Considering the players know the system so well, they've played in it under Ruben Amorim, and he doesn't change it. We all know that. He's very stubborn. So the players knew what to expect, and yet they couldn't really get to grips with it. When Milan actually went forward, they found spaces and they looked dangerous in certain moments. Obviously, that was made worse by the sloppy defending and some moments of real lack of concentration there at the back. So yeah, it was a disappointing performance. Carrick would have liked to have seen more. He said there was reasons for it when he spoke in his post-match interview. As I said, one of those reasons will be the players coming back. And I think now we're looking ahead to the whole game. And I think probably 9 positions have probably been decided in my mind. He obviously went with a strong team against Milan. I think the 2 positions that are up for grabs this week are right back and the third midfield spot. So potentially between Dalot and Mazraoui, they came back for pre-season around the same time. So in terms of fitness, they're quite level. Obviously, Mazraoui's played there on the weekend. Dalot played against Leeds. So it'd be interesting to see which player gets the nod against Hull. I think it might be Mazraoui. And then with the third midfield spot, obviously Tielemans started the game behind Bruno Fernandes and obviously alongside André Santos as well. Now, Tielemans might have the edge over Mason Mount now. Mount was fantastic at the start of the summer, but he picked up a little knock. It's led to believe it's just a very little small niggle, but it's been enough to keep him out of the Leeds match and this game against AC Milan. So does Yuri Tielemans now have the advantage? And then the third point that I thought, obviously, coming out of that match, away from the match analysis, was they need new signings. They need to strengthen. They've got 15 days left now until September the 1st, until the transfer deadline, and they need new bodies through the door. They can't let Michael Carrick down.
And you mentioned there, obviously we'll talk about transfers in the second half of this podcast, but you mentioned there about the third midfielder, and it's interesting. It feels funny after a game where United did score from set piece, but they lost a little bit of a attacking threat there. Obviously, Casemiro, we know, had a unbelievable season with his heading ability and getting those goals from set pieces. Do you think that that's something United are going to miss looking into the new season?
Yeah, I was actually writing a piece before the game for the morning about that. I had some time and I was kind of delving into the numbers from set pieces. So I was chatting with my editor and I went, look, they'll definitely score from a set piece today. Now I'm putting that out, and obviously within 2 minutes or whatever it was, Harry Maguire pops up with a header, a brilliant ball from Bruno Fernandes at that corner. But Maguire scored just one header last season, and you're right, with Casemiro leaving the club, there's going to be a big void there. He scored 8 headed goals last season. He was just crazy, wasn't he, in the box from headers? And he's not the tallest, around 6'1", but his movement was just brilliant. He's so intelligent, and when he attacks the ball, he does it with real purpose. So he was a huge threat. He was a bit of a secret weapon in that regard, because when he came to the club, you would not have associated Casemiro with headed goals, but he kind of made it his trademark in a way. And look, I think the opposition knew he was the danger man, but they couldn't stop him because of his movement. So that is going to be a big miss. And the concern is who's going to step up. Because as I said, that when you look at the alternatives in that dressing room and you look at the stats from last season, no other player scored more than 1 headed goal. So I think there was around 6 players who scored headers. Sesko, Ahmad, Dorgu, De Ligt, Maguire, there might be one more. But that it just shows you that the remainder of the squad need to do more. I'm kind of looking at Maguire now and thinking the responsibility might fall to his shoulders. And we saw it there with that goal. When he can outmuscle the opponent, when he moves like that, the box, he's very hard to stop. But we're going to have to see it more often, because to lose 8 headed goals, I mean, obviously that's hard to repeat across a season, but that leaves a big void there. Casemiro was incredibly dangerous from those scenarios. And we've seen it in the Premier League over the last 18 months, 2 years. The importance of set pieces, they often decide games. Matches have become so tight. And these moments from corners, from free kicks, can prove decisive. We've seen it with Arsenal, Set Piece FC, they're winning the league. They've become masters of it. Sometimes it's not pretty, but it's very effective. And Michael Carrick knows that. He was asked about set pieces last season, and he spoke about the importance of them. And no doubt Steve Holland's had a big role in that. England were very good at set pieces during his time working under Gareth Southgate. Obviously, if you remember the bus system at the 2018 World Cup, when the players were lining up behind each other, England had a lot of success from corners and whatnot. So no doubt they will be working on it, and they will be aware that other players need to step up to contribute more. But it was encouraging to see Maguire do that against Milan.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I was watching the Community Shield yesterday, and there was a lot of talk there about how the referees are going to look to clamp down on sort of contact in the area coming up to corners. And I think we saw it. Gabriel and Kusanov had a bit of a to and fro, and which led to a free kick to Manchester City. And you just wonder whether that's going to potentially impact the sort of purpose of corners and set pieces getting goals. But as you say, when you've got a player like Casemiro in that side that's just so good at set pieces and with headers, it was a constant source of goals, and that's something that United are going to lack this season.
Yeah, and the elephant in the room is, has he actually been replaced? I mean, obviously we're talking about his threat from set pieces, but what he actually offered to the back four, the defensive work that he went through in midfield. Now, look, Andre Santos has come into the club, and Michael Carrick raved about him during the sit-down last week in Ireland, just outside Dublin at Carton House, with the Manchester pack. In Ty covered it. He waxed lyrical about him, really, and said he was a fantastic signing, and he obviously really thinks he's got a really high ceiling. But you've also got Tielemans there, and does he provide the mobility in the defensive? Does he get through the defensive work that Casemiro did? I'm not so sure. We saw that on Saturday. I thought there was some good moments from Tielemans. There was some crisp passing, and that's what he's very capable of doing. There was a moment when he danced away from his marker and kind of played a defence split and ball. He was probably denied an assist just by the offside flag. It looked likely to be a goal. So his passing's really good, but he's not the most mobile midfielder in the world. I think we all know that, and he's got a lot of minutes on the clock at 29 years old. And then Santos as well, he's 22, and look, he's going to have to perform well this season. The high standards are going to be expected of him. But is he a proper number 6? Is he going to get through the bulk of that defensive work? I actually see him probably a bit more between a number 6 and number 8. And that's why United signed him, because he had that kind of all-round quality. He's capable of going forward, he's capable of passing. And that's been the strategy this summer. They've wanted to sign midfielders who have a bit more all-round quality. But when you look at what they lost with Casemiro, and you look at what's left, how many days are left in the window, I would like to see a more defensive-minded midfielder come in, a more mobile midfielder. And now the question is whether that's going to happen. I know we said we're going to discuss transfers in the second part, but it does feel like a priority now. It has been a priority. They understand it, obviously. They've wanted to sign a third midfielder, but the problem is now that the targets have become, they've fallen like dominoes, really. They've gone to other clubs, and we're in the back end of the transfer window now, and we're looking at potentially who those players are. You're scratching your head a little bit. Obviously, Tchouaméni's out of Madrid. That's now looking, it always has been, very unlikely. So that is a concern. And when you see these performances, and again, look, we're not going to get too carried away because it's pre-season. But when it's a performance like that, a 4-2 defeat against Milan, when they've found a lot of space in midfield and they've got joy in that area, that's clearly a cause for concern. Because can United cope when they come across the best teams this season? Liverpool, Arsenal, City in the midfield, in the centre of the pitch. They definitely need a new midfielder in there to help them do so.
And just moving away from midfield, obviously we mentioned that Marcus Rashford got his first minutes back for Manchester United in Poland this weekend. What do you make of his sort of performance? A bit of a hard one to judge, just coming back from his World Cup break, but important minutes for him ahead of the big kick-off next weekend.
He was sprinting. He was running, Jack. He was running around. Felt like he did that on purpose, didn't he? I mean, he was making it known to everyone that he was committed, that he was running, and that he was putting a shift in. His first act was actually making a foul. So I think that said it all. He was there to actually put himself about, and he's probably aware of the conversation around him that obviously came about leading up to his departure in the club in December 24. So, look, we all know the chain of events that led to his departure and what happened with Ruben Amorim. He was a bit like a cat with 9 lives. Erik ten Hag could have axed him. Amorim finally had the minerals to do so. Ten Hag felt it was detrimental to kind of axe Rashford at the time. He wanted to, but he kept him around the place and reintegrated him after that incident in Belfast. In terms of his performance on Saturday, I thought he was actually pretty good. He was direct. He clearly offers something different on the wing. That's what Michael Carrick has said. He says he adds a little bit something different in the squad in terms of the directness that he can add. You've got Patrick Dorgu there, and when you compare him to Patrick Dorgu, both obviously athletic players, but Patrick Dorgu is transitioning into a winger, so he doesn't perhaps have that quality in the final third that Rashford has. There was a moment when he kind of latched onto the ball and he drove it as his full-back, which was positive, and it kind of shows what he can do. And look, we know what Rashford can do when he's on a good day. The problem is he going to be consistent? Can he provide those good days consistently across the season? He was frustratingly inconsistent, and that's why he essentially left the club. It was a massive part of it, and the failure to track back, his body language, etc., and then the off-pitch behaviour. So, look, it was a step in the right direction. I said on the podcast last week after he was welcomed back that I think it's all going to go to plan. I could see him having a successful season. It just, then you wondering whether it's all going to blow up in 6 months' time. Now, hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully he scores plenty of goals and hopefully he's a big success. And I will say, obviously, look, Carrick has not outright confirmed that Marcus Rashford will be reintegrated to the squad. The club have not, but it looks increasingly likely. If an offer arrives in the last week or so, it obviously would be considered, but it would have to be from the right club. And with the top clubs who could actually pay Rashford's wages and get him on their books, are they looking for a player like that in the final week or so in the window? I'm not so sure. So it does look likely that he'll stay in. He was wearing number 9. United said that was just provisional. Obviously, the squad numbers will be confirmed to the Premier League this week. But that's an important squad number. You don't just give that. It felt significant, didn't it? So we'll have to see. I think it's likely he will be wearing that shirt number. I'd be very surprised if he isn't.
Yeah, and just heading into the game against Hull, it feels like there's 3 sort of contenders to play on that left wing. There's Rashford, Cunha, and Dorgu. If you're a betting man, where would you be putting your money for the start next week?
I've already lost £12 at the fair, Jack. I don't want to lose any more money. But no, I think it'd be a safe bet to say Patrick Dorgu's nailed on, I feel. That's what I mean when I say 9 of those positions I feel like have been decided, and that includes Patrick Dorgu playing on the wing. He's played the bulk of the pre-season in that position. Obviously, Matheus Cunha has come back slightly later from the World Cup, having played for Brazil. He's also played down the middle. Clearly, Carrick's preparing for the season because Sesko's been absent, recovering from a shin injury. Should be back in the squad next weekend, but he's still not played a single minute. So he's played Cunha down the middle. He's obviously also played in Birmingham there. But Rashford's just played, it was half an hour, wasn't it? He came on at the hour mark, so he's not going to start at Hull. So it's going to be Dorgu. And I imagine it's a Birmingham down the middle, Dorgu and Ahmad. I think that's basically the confirmed attack for me in my mind anyways. I'd be surprised if it's anything different come 11:15 on Saturday when the teams are confirmed, because obviously it's the early kickoff. And Dorgu, actually, I thought he was a bit better against Milan. I thought he wasn't that good against Leeds. He looked more like a fullback against Leeds. And ironically, when he had a involvement in Xerxes' goal, he obviously played the pass to Mbeumo, and he was actually in the position of a left back, and he was really composed. He was around three Leeds shirts, and he managed to weave his way out and make the pass. And when he got into the final third against Leeds, I thought his final ball was disappointing, but he looked a lot better here. He looked dangerous, and look, there's more to come from Dorgu. He clearly needs to add more to that side of his game. His crossing needs to get better, but I'd written a piece in January to shed some light on the work he was doing to improve. Around that time, he was doing a lot of extras after training, doing crosses with coaches after to really sharpen that side of his skill set. And then he was doing shooting as well, and that really paid off. We saw that around January. It was such a shame that he picked up an injury against Arsenal. He obviously scored a brilliant goal. And it was funny because he scored a very simple goal against AC Milan. I didn't realise he was capable of scoring tap-ins. I thought he was Dorgu best. I thought he was just scoring absolute bangers and screamers all the time. So yeah, he can score tap-ins as well. But he's got more to work on, but he's got the attitude to do so. It'll be exciting to see what he can do against Hull, because he's got all the traits, the skill sets to kind of really cause them problems with his pace down the left. So we'll see on Saturday.
And obviously we couldn't finish this first half of the podcast without talking about Mr. Amorim, and he looked like a man with the world off his shoulders as he exited the stadium on Saturday. And obviously he had that little joke with members of the United press pack where he suggested it was more boring now, the press conferences, which I think, it's, in all fairness to Carrick, we can all agree they are a little bit less eventful, the press conferences, than when they were under Amorim. An interesting afternoon for him and reunion with Manchester United, wasn't it?
I think it was Ty who said that. I couldn't really tell from the clip. Obviously, Ty was across there. Simon Stone from the BBC, Laurie Whitwell from The Athletic, were all in the mix zone waiting for Amorim to come through, with the hope that he'd stop for a chat. And I think the lads had said to him, we miss you. Press conferences aren't the same. Amorim's replied with a massive smile and said they're a lot more boring now. And he's been laughing as he's left the stadium. That line was brilliant. Fair play to Ruben Amorim. He's clearly got a sense of humour, and we knew that during his time at the club. His press conferences were outstanding, but the football clearly was not outstanding. He was a brilliant with us during media engagements, but yes, he was an awful manager, and obviously we all know what happened. So it was interesting to see him get the win, really, wasn't it? I mean, 4-2, he would have been delighted with that. I think he played it down with the Italian press after and said, look, it was just a normal game, but no doubt he would have thoroughly enjoyed it. And he was approached by several players after the match. A few of them went over. Bruno Fernandes went over to begin with. He was followed by Mazraoui, who shared a warm embrace with Amorim, shared a few words. And it was interesting, actually. One of the Fletcher brothers went across. I can only presume it was Jack, because Amorim gave him his debut around December time last year. Jack went across and spoke to him. Obviously, Amorim's stance on the academy was well documented, but also Harry Amas went across as well. And I thought that was really interesting, because there was a pointed comment from Amorim in the press conference about young players, and he included Harry Amas. And I know for a fact that didn't go down too well with Harry Amas. So he was mature enough to walk across and speak to Ruben Amorim, along with Jack Fletcher, clearly just putting that behind him. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him as well. Obviously, we've talked about it a few times. But yeah, clearly, look, and we knew it. Amorim's still held in high regard with some of the squad. We'll say some of the squad, because clearly some of the players were delighted to see the back of him, but some of the players were generally sad to see him go. I remember speaking to Brian in Burmo, I think it was 2 weeks after he departed, and he kind of bristled at a question that we suggested it had been bad under Amorim, because it had been, really. And he suggested that things weren't as bad as it seemed from the outside, and the squad were actually moving in the right direction. So there was a lot of social media posts when he left, a lot of thank yous and goodbyes as well. So I'd say around the squad was probably half and half in terms of how they viewed him. But yes, he would have enjoyed that on Saturday, no doubt.
Now, obviously, that's the end of pre-season for Manchester United. Who have been your sort of standout performers from this summer, Steve? Because for me, it feels like Brian Mbeumo's had a really good summer playing in that position, with obviously Šeško absent due to injury. He's really made that centre forward role his own when given the opportunity. But it'd be interesting to know sort of who you've picked out as your sort of standouts.
Yeah, I'd agree with him. And Mbeumo has been very good, which has been pleasing to see, because his form dropped off in the second half of last season. We all know he made an outstanding start to his time at the club after signing from Brentford. He was electrifying in those first 8 weeks or so, and prolific. But yeah, his form tailed off slightly. He obviously went to AFCON during the middle of the season, so perhaps that had something to do with it. But he's been back to his best, scoring goals. He's gone through the gears. Perhaps there was a few sloppy touches in the first 2 games, but he's looked a lot sharper, as you would expect, as he's gained fitness. But to be honest, I think for me, I mean, Santos and Mason Mount were or have been the standout performers. Mason Mount was until he picked up the injury, and it's such a shame that he's picked up that little niggle that obviously denied him the momentum going into the whole game. And that's kind of been the frustrating thing with Mason Mount's time at the football club. We all know what he can do when he's on the pitch, and he looks so promising, but occasionally he picks up these tiny little injuries that disrupts his flow. But until he picked up that little niggle, he was really good. His passing was crisp. He was tenacious in midfield. He was high energy. He always is. Really pressing the opponent, and was so a different side of his game in the sense that he was playing a deeper role, and we have seen it before, but perhaps we've never been truly convinced about Mason Mount in that position. But I thought that slightly changed this summer, and there was hope that he potentially could play there and be very efficient in the new season. So look, hopefully he's back and he's available against Hull, because if he's not, that little niggle would have turned into something more. And Santos as well has obviously been positive. I spoke about him there briefly in the first part, but there's been some really good signs. Is again breaking up play. His passing's been good. You can see why United were attracted to him. He's clearly got a high ceiling. He's got all the tools to become a top midfielder, I believe. We've seen that. I'd like to see him control his game a little bit more in terms of his temperament, because he's making a few fouls. I've noticed that already. Me and Ty did a prediction podcast that will be released on Friday. And one of the questions was who's going to get the most yellow cards. So he's a bit of a spoiler alert, and we both agreed that it was Santos. And that's just going off watching him for the last 6 matches, or five games or so that he's been involved. Now 6 because he was involved against Wrexham. And he has made a lot of fouls, and clearly he's got that to his game. He's got the edge, like most South Americans do, to be fair. Bit of a cliche, but they all play on the edge and have that fiery temperament. But it could be a problem if he's being quite rash with his tackles and challenges. Could lead to some dangerous areas, free kicks being conceded. So perhaps you'll have to rein that in slightly in the new season. But of course, we all know what Casemiro did. He loved the yellow card as well, and he was immensely popular.
Definitely. And obviously Michael Carrick sat down with the United press pack last week and was very positive about how pre-season has gone, which is, to be expected. What would you say is your sort of reaction to it? Obviously, a mixed bag of results, but then again, results aren't going to matter too much at this stage. Do you think there's enough to get United fans optimistic for this new campaign that starts on Saturday?
Well, they've won the Boyle Sports Cup, though, haven't they? After a penalty shootout against Leeds. So, I mean, that's what it's all about. As long as the Boyle Sports Cup is back in the trophy cabinet, I hope they put it in, because when we go into Carrington, obviously there's a Champions League, there's a Premier League, a nod to the past. Hopefully there's a Boyle Sports Cup there in the press conference on Friday when I walk in, and I'll get a photo with it, might get a selfie and upload that. They actually drew that game, of course, so it was 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 defeats. Can you consider that Leeds game a victory because it was a penalty shootout? I'm not sure. I'd say I've actually quite liked the way it's being structured pre-season. They've obviously stayed in Europe for the first time since 2002, excluding the COVID years. And that decision was obviously made because the World Cup was going on. So they were putting player performance and welfare at the forefront of their minds. They obviously had an offer to go out to Thailand, a more lucrative offer, and they turned that down because they believed there would be a better preparation just staying in Europe. And they've had time, obviously, in between those games. So they've gone out to these cities, they've slept over in a hotel, they've played the match, and then they come straight back home. And then they've had a block of training at Carrington. And I think that's actually a really good way of doing it. If they were in the position to turn down the money next summer, I believe they probably would do so to kind of do the same again. But at the end of the day, that money is so big and so important that they'll have to take it. They'll have to go to the Middle East again, or they'll have to go to America and bank that cash, because these tours are so big for the club commercially. They'll have to bank the cash. So I think it's been really positive in that regard, and it's put the squad in a good place. Morale's clearly high. We saw that video of Luke Shaw. I think they were playing a game called Werewolf. I've never heard of it before, but it's a card game. They're all laughing and joking, and it does seem a really closely knit squad. They seem in a good place, but again, we'll keep coming back to the fact that they need to make more signings, because if they don't make more signings, they're going to let Michael Carrick down. And he's not gone as far as to outright call out the board. He's never going to do that. He's very calm, very relaxed, and he's aligned with Jason Wilcox. He's aligned with Omar Barada, but he said, keep pushing. We need to keep pushing when he sat down in Dublin last week. And that, as we said on the podcast, is as pointed as Michael Carrick gets. He's not going to do Mourinho in 2018 when he was out in America and he blew up. He was frustrated and angry with the lack of transfer activity, and obviously Mourinho was sacked in December. But he's clearly, I'd say he wants more, and he needs more, because if he doesn't get more, it's going to be a disappointing window. But look, they're in the position where they've spent £85 million, and there clearly is money to spend there. I know the message this summer, kind of from the behind the scenes at the club, has been, we need to remain disciplined, we need to spend sensibly, we need to take a long-term view. But they've only spent £85 million this summer. 3 signings, Carl Darlow, Yuri Tillemans and Andrew Santos. They obviously spent £215 million last summer, and that's excluding add-ons, so it was a little bit more than that. So theoretically, you get a left-back in there, get a midfielder. Perhaps you could still even you spend less than what they committed last summer. The club was in a good position financially going into the transfer window. There's obviously been a lot of changes, redundancies, cost cutting. I worked out in May when the financial numbers came out that they had the headroom to kind of spend £300 million. Now, let me stress, that was on paper, that was theoretically, because they made 3 payments to that revolving credit facility, aka their credit card essentially. So they had scope to do that. Now, again, I'll stress that that's on paper. So they were never going to splash £300 million in this window. But it does show that there is money there to spend in the last week and a half, and they're going to have to spend it. They're going to have to get the checkbook out. It's currently got cobwebs on, so Sir Jim Ratcliffe needs to blow away the cobwebs and put his finger in his pocket.
Well, there we go. There's the message, Jim, if you're watching. Obviously, we've rolled quite nicely onto transfers there, and you mentioned a bit about left-backs and a third midfielder. That obviously feels like the most likely areas United are going to improve if they are to make new signings. Who can we sort of expect United to look at? Because it feels like there isn't a host of options at the moment. Obviously, Lewis Skelly is one that's on the radar, but after his performance for Arsenal on Sunday, you wonder whether Arsenal actually do want to let him go now at all.
Lewis Hall and too many coming in, Jack, don't worry. £300 million just spent on those two players to get Newcastle and Real Madrid let them go. No, obviously that's not going to happen. But Lewis Hall, as we've talked about throughout the transfer window, would be a dream signing, but it's always looked unlikely. He was signed from £35 million from Chelsea a few years ago. I believe they've actually got a bit of a sell-on clause as well. So look, Newcastle would want around 70 million to even consider selling him. And the optics of selling Lewis Hall in a window when they've already lost Guimaraes, Tonali, and Anthony Gordon to Barcelona would be incredibly, incredibly bad. So for that reason, that feels dead in the water at this moment. And obviously, we keep talking about this midfielder, and we've talked a lot about the data department at the club and the kind of emphasis and faith in this data department now that's overseen by Michael Sansoni. And it's going to be important in these last 2 weeks because perhaps this algorithm is going to have to come up with someone who we didn't expect and come up with a name. I actually thought that would be possible for a striker signing because if a midfielder comes in, a left back comes in, which they still need to do, perhaps a striker could come in as well, but they might have to be creative with this player. Striker seems down the priority list, having spoken to someone. Obviously, midfielder and left back at the moment is the way they're looking at it. You've just mentioned Lewis Skelly. They do like him. If the money was right and he was available, I'm sure they would be definitely interested in that deal. And of course, he could play midfield as well, can't he? We saw that last season. So he would almost tick off two boxes. He could play at full back in midfield and midfield. But that would be a bit... I'd be slightly concerned if that is the strategy. I'd be skimping out, trying to sign a player to tick off two positions. So they need to get these last 2 weeks right. But as I've said, the problem is you're looking at potential targets and you are scratching your head. You are thinking who is available here, who could actually really strengthen this squad. Because as the summer's gone on, the targets have gone to other clubs. So it's going to be really interesting. I keep saying that they can't let Carrick down, and it does feel that way. He was asked a question at the back end of last season about getting the transfer window right and the importance of it, and he kind of just brushed it off in typical Carrick fashion and said, look, every transfer window is important, but it will undermine the work he did at the football club if they don't get this transfer window right. And Santos was a good signing, Tielemans was a good signing, obviously Darlow, not the most exciting signing, but you could a good addition to the goalkeeper department. They made a good start, but they need to finish well.
And obviously outgoings as well could be on the cards for for Manchester United. Can we expect any permanent signings or is departures, I should say, or is it going to be more loan based this summer?
Yeah, I'm not in terms of the first team. Perhaps Joshua Zirkzee. There's been whispers of interest from Juventus. I was speaking to someone a week and a half ago about that. Would an option, a season-long loan with an option, be considered potentially? I think United would like that to be an obligation. They've obviously been stung there with the Marcus Rashford deal. They thought that was home and dry. They thought Barcelona were going to pay the £26 million. Obviously, they made a U-turn and went for Anthony Gordon for around £70 million, a lot of money. So I think they would have learned from that, and they might insist on obligations in the future. So if Zirkzee is to go out, then that would probably be the case. But he might actually stay in because there could be short in that area now. We're talking about potentially signing a striker. Obviously, Burma can play there, Kuna can play there, Ahmad can play there. You could even play Bruno Fernandes as a false nine. You're not going to do it because he's so brilliant as number 10. But they do have kind of options there and versatile players. Rashford, of course, I've slipped my mind, can play up front. So, yeah, whether or not they'll allow Zirkzee to go out remains to be seen. There's going to be more departures from the academy. They could be permanent deals agreed. There will be more loans. I was down at Altrincham I think 2 weeks ago now when the under-21s played. I think it was around a 26-man squad. I think around half of those players will leave the club, whether that be on permanence or whether that be on loans. And I think fair play to United this summer because we've seen it now for 2 years when these players leave the club. They're in certain very favourable clauses to make more money off these players. We saw it when Ethan Williams joined Peterborough last week. A buyback, a sell-on, a matching rights clause. So inserting all these clauses into deals and insisting on them protects the club. It makes money down the line. It helps with PSR, and it's very intelligent business. It probably started around 2024 when Greenwood left the club. We saw it with him and Willy Kambwala, Alvaro Fernandez. I think it was the first summer it's really started to begin. It was noticeable. Obviously, Ineos had just came in and gained control of football operations, and they've done it in each summer since. And they needed to do that because that's what savvy Premier League clubs do, and they negotiate these clauses. Obviously, we've seen it with Radek Vitek as well, going to Middlesbrough when we saw those clauses, high sell-on clauses, etc., and a buyback included. So, yeah, there will be activity. I think Toby Collier as well is one to keep an eye on. I was told at the start of the window that from Collier's perspective, it was kind of he had to wait. He had to wait until United got their ducks in a row with their midfielders. They weren't going to allow him to leave at the start of the window when they didn't know what their midfield was going to look like. Collier, I thought, looked really good against Leeds last week. He played a lot of forward passing. I thought his running was good as usual. He can just run all day, that lad. Run 13 kilometres a match, which is pretty freakish to have that ability. And I could see him becoming a Premier League player in a few years, so there might be a good deal there for a club to have. But whether that's going to be a permanent or a loan, we'll have to see. There is interest. And again, there's no point of kind of listing the players, the academy players who could leave on loan, because as I've said, there's around, it could be 6 or 7 who could leave on loan before the end of the transfer deadline.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be an exciting end to the summer transfer window, hopefully. With
just as exciting as my dart story, Jack. Just as exciting as my dart
Exactly.
Story.
I'm sure the comments will love that one.
If everyone didn't turn off at that point of the podcast, yeah.
Well, let's hope not after just a minute. But yeah, thank you very much, Steven, for your time. Obviously, you can follow all of the latest Manchester United news over on the Manchester Evening News website. But until next time, thank you for joining us and goodbye.